Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Saturday Night Sleepover. I'm your host, Charlie, and today I'm going to do a different format of the podcast. This is going to be the first time I've ever done it this way, but I'm pretty excited for it. So, most of you know that I went on a pretty emotional trip. Like, if you listen to the Body Remembers episode that I did about a month ago with my sister, we were on a trip back home, and we recorded while we were there in the house that we grew up in, and I was feeling a lot of emotions at that time, and so I kind of like processed all that out and figured out a way to put down in words what I was feeling. And today I'm going to read that article that I wrote, and it's an ode to public spaces and a little bit about my story and background. And so I hope you enjoy it, but here we go. Let me pull it up really quick. Okay, 3, 2, 1, go. Holding space is a term that I'm used to using frequently as a former mental health worker and a birth worker. The term implies that there's a sacredness in space. The sacredness of space holds memories locked in the corners you forgot existed. As an adult who has traveled and lived all over America, going home typically feels like you are dusting off old maps in your brain. Places and smells hold memories you forgot. I was half raised in a library by loving, beautiful, kind librarians who saw a feral child and gave her a home. This will be an ode to public spaces as much of a story for the home I was raised in. The fall of 2024 marked 20 plus years since the library welcomed me home. It also came with the announcement that an influential librarian would be retiring. My sister and I planned a trip home to be there for the retirement party. The day was an ordinary Wednesday for most, but for a few, it was the end of an era. The house we grew up in is now a nightly rental, and we had the opportunity to rent it as grown-ups to go to the retirement party. We recreated some photos that I'll share, and there was much more that we were able to experience because we stayed in the space that we did. It's hard to pinpoint the exact moment that I knew I had two homes. It was a gradual process. The library was a sacred haven for many, but for me, it was a place that I felt cozy and loved. My domicile didn't feel to me of the library safety. The place that I called home is a story for the ages. The year I turned 9, I lived in a family with divorced parents and a mom who had remarried. I have a stepsister that's 2 years older than I am, and my other siblings are at least 8 years older than I am. I'm the baby of the family, and normally that's a coveted role. However, in my case, I had a mom who was already tired of having little kids by the time that I came around. So I pretty much raised myself or had sisters raise me. My mom did her best, and by the time I was becoming a person, she had moved on to her own dreams and aspirations. One of my mom's aspirations was to redo a house she saw while we were house hunting in Virginia after my stepdad had moved us across the country for a new job opportunity. And for those of you who haven't done a bi-coastal move, that process includes renting a house and finding something until you find something that you want to settle into. My parents decided they wanted to take on a large renovation as they're settling in place. We're talking an unlivable space that we had to lift up the entire house and pour a foundation before we could even start the true work. If you're picturing a quaint craftsman on a half-acre lot, you're picturing the wrong kind of house. The house that my parents had chosen was a whopping 11-bedroom, 6-bathroom house on 2 lots that was built in the 1800s as a plantation. The land around the house had slowly been sold, creating an eclectic neighborhood. This house takes up 2 oversized lots and is an entire block. My sister and I, at this point in our lives, were homeschooled 100%. But with the magnitude of the house to be built, our educational needs for typical subjects like math and science were pushed aside, and we were then enrolled in a 365-day-a-year school of construction. We're not talking about kid-sized jobs for kids. When I say we were in construction school, we were given the work of grown men as early as 10 years old. When I was 14 years old, my mom said, if you wanted your own room, you'd build it. And I did, the whole thing, from electrical to finish work. My whole room was my craftswomanship. When we came back 20 years later to the retirement party, the new owner of the house said to us in a visit, "Oh, that's something I never learned about my house, that it was built on the backs of child labor," which is a perspective that I now see and appreciate. I can remember the long days of hard work and wishing for an outside job so that someone driving by would see a young lady working outside when her peers were in school. I wished for outside jobs so that passerbys might call someone to check on the living conditions, but nobody ever called and I was never checked on. Rather than homework assignments our peers received, we would be given job lists to complete each day while our parents were working. I slowly learned that in order to find another way of living, I'd have to seek it out myself. I sought out anything that would get me out of the house. I created a world that I could retreat to without the help of anyone else. I see this as an adult pattern that still plays out in the form of, fine, I'll do it myself, moments. The upside of nobody checking on the feral child is that the feral child is free to wander, and I wandered. My hometown is ideal for wandering. It's small geographically and in population. It is a peninsula on the Potomac River. Some days the air was so dense that you couldn't see land on the other side. It almost felt like we lived somewhere on the ocean. The smell of salty air and fish still to this day send me home in my mind. Our house was a block from the boardwalk and riverfront, and due to a dispute of state lines and fee collection, the river was technically Maryland and the shore was Virginia, so no fishing license was required to fish from the shore or pier. I could take a fishing rod and head down to the beach as long as my jobs were done. I soon found my way into different businesses or to check the mail at my mom's work. Eventually, I wandered into the library, and I was greeted by a warm hello from a community-loving librarian. At that time, the library was in a building that, at the time of the retirement party, had been converted into a wine bar where you could get a duck breast salad my little girl heart could not even comprehend. A short time later, the library was moved into a newly renovated former grocery store. Half of the grocery store was converted into a library, and half the grocery store was converted into the town meeting space, with a shared bathroom/conference room in the middle. Small town drama was the best way to describe the city meetings that went on in the other half of the building. I went to many of them growing up because of my mom's work. I also went to meetings and other town events because I'd found my way into being on the books as a freelance photographer for 2 local newspapers. I had a byline in the paper since 2003, a fact about myself that is usually reserved for the sleepover game, Two Truths and a Lie. Nobody ever guesses I'd be a published photographer at age 12, but it was one of the 5 jobs that I had at that age. When the library moved to the new building, it provided so much space for the community programs. I participated in Girl Scouts in the beginning. My sister, who was 8 years older than I was the leader. My 2 years older sister and I were in the troop, and for the 2 of us, this was many of our first experiences with peers. We wandered into the library more, and the library manager started a program where kids who were nervous reading out loud could read to service dogs. for some non-judgmental practice. Ideals like this are what helped kids in our community find space for them. And it's through that library program that I stopped being afraid of reading out loud, which, pause the reading, I'm doing right now. And still grateful to this day to those dogs. Another lovely program that I remember was an after-hours game night on evenings that the library closed at 5 p.m. We would sign up to go to game night. We mostly played Scrabble, but the people who signed up were my sister and I and a group of witty, sassy, hilarious senior women. I loved getting to know their stories of roller skating through the Library of Congress in D.C. in their youth, or hearing about how their late husband had started a boat business from the ground up. The seniors enjoyed having a young person to talk to. I was labeled as outspoken right away. I didn't know what that meant, and I'm still not sure I do. And we loved spending time together. One memory I have of Scrabble night where I had put the word fart on the board, and one of the regular game night attendees had missed the infamous dirty word night. She said to me the next day, "I missed last night when I heard you put a 4-letter word on the board that started with F." My face turned so red, and so did hers, and she realized that what she had implied. In those days, you would never say a 4-letter word in the presence of your elder, but I didn't know such things. I learned that day, though. I also learned simple but beautiful wisdom from those ladies, such as, never worry about the back of your hair, because if someone is going to make fun of the back of your hair, it sounds where they're right in where they need to be, behind you. Or, don't worry if you can pull off a new haircut or a new hat or a new look. If you believe you can pull it off, you can. All it takes is you believing it. Having exposure to wisdom at such a young age was pivotal for my growth. I love those women and the gift that they gave me. I found myself wanting to walk when we returned to our hometown. I'm not an early riser naturally, but on this trip home down memory lane, I craved walking. I would wake up early and I craved walking early and spending time alone, walking all the steps that I walked in my youth. I think it was my body communicating with my subconscious to get me to revisit the places from my past. As I walked, I felt visceral feelings of hurt, while simultaneously feeling peace, as if grown-up Charlie was sent there to keep little Charlie safe. I don't claim to be an expert on dimensions. However, I know in that space, in that town, there were traces of the past that were reaching out to me. Places hold joy, hurt, anger, safety, and fear. Little Charlie was scared, but she always knew she would make it to safety. Was she confident she would make it to future Charlie? Because future Charlie came to this place and reached through the dimensions to hold her. I think there may be something to this theory. I can't help but be grateful for the trip that I took. I had no idea that I would be touched so emotionally, but it gave me the opportunity to peek through the dimensions and physically be there for a younger version of myself who was consistently living through hard things. Who knows if the feelings that I felt were just me in this timeline feeling closure, or if there was really some interdimensional rift. I can tell you that I have been able to release so many anxieties that I previously would deal with before this trip. Whatever that means, someone smarter than me can come up with a theory if mine doesn't work. I even took some walks with my sister, who had many shared traumas with me. One night we ended up at the library at closing time, which was our usual shift when we worked there. The night before the retirement party, we got to stay till closing and listen to the lights flick off and the key in the lock just one last time with our library godmothers. being present in this moment was really cool. It was like we were feeling the era end in the prelude before the party. After we went to the library, we walked home and we found a restaurant for dinner, a Thai French fusion place. This restaurant was in the same building. They used to have a cool smoothie shop, and that was fun to go to in high school. I remember after I got my wisdom teeth out, I couldn't eat anything because of my big swollen cheeks. My sister took me to the smoothie shop, and it was the only thing I could eat without chewing. It was just about the only thing that I ate the week of my recovery. And here I was, a 30-something, on a nostalgia hangover, eating pad thai with my sister. In true Colonial Beach fashion, 4 police cars showed up at the house across the street from the restaurant when we were finishing our food. We went outside, and the owner of the restaurant was out there too. She gave us background that some kids had gotten in a squabble with their parents over not being allowed to date each other and were yelling in the street. Very Colonial Beach. I told the owner that I was feeling nosy, but that I had no right to because I don't live here anymore. She said, "You used to live here? What's your name?" I told her my name and my mom's name, and she replied, "Oh, you lived in the big house." That is what it is like to be where I am from. Everyone knows you, where you grew up. It's just that kind of a place. There's nothing quite like feeling like someone knows you because they were in the same place that you were. It's not a thing I get to experience often, so when it comes, I cherish it. The retirement party was held in the location where the community that the librarian built was made. It was unfortunately an underwhelming event. Any party wouldn't have been enough to Any party would it not be enough to commemorate her impact. Over the last few years, the library was purchased by a corporate entity, and the hometown community feel had been drained from it. The party organizers asked 3 speakers to say some words. 2 out of the 3 had never had a conversation with the honoree before. I am so grateful to have commemorated her in our own way before the actual party. After many years of lock-ins and movie nights and game nights as a youth, the management decision to hold the party during operating hours and not even give one after-hours hour to a woman who spent 35 years building and mothering in this place is just mind-boggling to me. The end of an era was never more evident than it was at that party. The era of a safe third place, a community sport, was dissolved. Little by little, it was a ghost of what I had remembered. What are we if we don't have a sacred place that anyone can gather and find community? Just as food, water, and shelter, community is a basic need. There are plenty of places that community can be found, but most of those places require some sort of monetary donation and or payment. Libraries are not that. Libraries are there for the prince and peasant alike. I had a library that impacted my life. I would not be who I am today without the safe haven provided and the community I was folded into. To see a world where those don't exist feels scary and unknown. If we don't provide community accessible to all, where will we draw the line? Who does and who doesn't get to have access to a basic human need of community? Who gets to decide who has access? It is important to think about these things before we lose something we didn't realize we needed, so we can nurture our spaces before they die. So this article is part story, part soapbox, part homage, part conspiracy theory. But that's just part of me. Thank you for holding space for part of my story.